You were born into a system you never chose. A nation you never picked. A language you never selected. And before you took your first breath, someone somewhere had already decided whether you would live in abundance or struggle for survival. What if I told you that the poverty you see, the underdevelopment you witness, the endless cycle of suffering in certain parts of the world is not an accident? What if it was designed? Not by fate. Not by God. Not even by bad luck. But by human hands. By decisions made in rooms you will never enter, by people whose names you will never know, who decided that some nations must remain poor so that others can remain rich. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the architecture of the modern world. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There is a country in Africa where the soil is so rich in minerals that it could make every citizen a millionaire. The cobalt that powers your smartphone, the coltan that makes your laptop possible, the diamonds that sit in engagement rings across the world, they all come from this place. Yet the people who live above these treasures earn less than $2 a day. Children as young as 7 crawl into mines with their bare hands, digging out the future of technology while their own future crumbles into dust. How is this possible? How does a nation sitting on trillions of dollars in resources remain one of the poorest places on earth? The answer will disturb you. Because the reason they stay poor is the same reason you have the device in your hand right now. Development is not a ladder that every country climbs at its own pace. It is a game. And in every game, there are winners and losers. But here is what they do not teach you in school. The winners do not win because they are smarter or work harder. They win because they wrote the rules. And the losers do not lose because they are lazy or corrupt. They lose because the game was rigged before they even sat down to play. Let me show you how. In the 1950s and 60s, dozens of countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America gained independence from colonial empires. The British left India. The French left Algeria. The Belgians left Congo. And for a brief moment, there was hope. Hope that these nations could finally control their own destiny, build their own economies, educate their own people. But independence on paper is not the same as independence in reality. Because even after the colonizers left, they left behind something far more powerful than soldiers. They left behind debt. Here is how it worked. The colonial powers had built infrastructure in these countries, roads, railways, ports, but not for the benefit of the local people. They built them to extract resources and ship them back to Europe. When independence came, the new governments inherited this infrastructure, but they also inherited the cost. And the former colonizers, along with global financial institutions, offered loans to help these new nations rebuild. It sounded generous. It sounded like help. But it was a trap. Because the loans came with conditions. Conditions that forced these countries to open their markets, privatize their resources, cut social spending, and prioritize debt repayment over everything else. And when they could not pay, the interest piled up. And when the interest piled up, they had to take more loans to pay the old ones. This is called debt colonization. And it is still happening today. But debt is only one weapon. There is another, more invisible, more brutal. It is called structural adjustment. In the 1980s, when many developing countries were drowning in debt, institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank stepped in with a solution. They would restructure the debt, give more time to pay, even forgive some of it. But in exchange, the countries had to agree to certain economic reforms. Sounds reasonable, right? Except these reforms were designed to benefit foreign corporations, not local people. Governments were forced to cut spending on healthcare and education. They were forced to remove subsidies on food and fuel. They were forced to sell off their national resources, water, electricity, oil, to private foreign companies. And the people suffered. Hospitals closed. Schools shut down. Prices skyrocketed. Unemployment exploded. And when the people protested, they were told it was their own fault. That their leaders were corrupt. That their culture was backward. That they simply were not ready for development. But the truth is, they were not allowed to develop. Because their development would threaten the system that keeps the powerful in power. Let me give you an example. There is a country in South America that discovered massive oil reserves in the early 2000s. The government decided to use the oil profits to fund healthcare, education, and poverty reduction. They built hospitals. They sent children to school for free. They lifted millions out of extreme poverty. And for a while, it worked. But then the global powers noticed. And they did not like it? Because if one country succeeds by rejecting the rules of the global economy, others might follow. So they applied pressure. Economic sanctions. Media campaigns. Political interference. They funded opposition groups. They spread stories of corruption and authoritarianism. And eventually, the economy collapsed. Not because the system failed, but because it was sabotaged. And today, that country is held up as an example of why independence does not work. Why poor countries cannot be trusted to manage their own resources. Why they need the guidance of the West. But that guidance is not guidance. It is control. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone do this? Why would powerful nations deliberately keep other nations poor? The answer is simpler and darker than you think. Because the global economy is not built on equality. It is built on extraction. The wealth of the developed world depends on the poverty of the underdeveloped world. Every cheap product you buy, every affordable service you enjoy, every technological convenience you take for granted, it exists because someone, somewhere, is being paid almost nothing to produce it. If those workers were paid fair wages, if those countries were allowed to industrialize and compete, prices would rise. Profits would fall. The entire system would collapse. So the system protects itself. By keeping certain countries locked in poverty. By making sure their resources flow outward, not inward. By ensuring their labor remains cheap, their markets remain open, and their governments remain dependent. And this is where it gets truly psychological. Because over time, the people living in these countries start to believe it is their fault. They look around and see corruption, and they blame their leaders. They see poverty, and they blame their culture. They see failure, and they blame themselves. And the rest of the world watches and agrees. They see the images on the news, the hunger, the disease, the violence, and they think, those people just cannot get it together. They need our help. They need our charity. They need us to save them. But what they really need is for us to stop destroying them. What they need is for the system to let go. But the system will never let go. Because it was designed not to. There is a term in psychology called learned helplessness. It was discovered in an experiment where dogs were placed in a cage and given electric shocks at random intervals. At first, the dogs tried to escape. They jumped, they scratched, they barked. But no matter what they did, the shocks kept coming. Eventually, they stopped trying. Even when the cage door was opened, even when escape was possible, they just lay there and accepted the pain. Because they had learned that nothing they did mattered. This is what happens to entire nations. When every attempt at independence is crushed, when every leader who tries to change the system is overthrown or assassinated, when every economic policy that benefits the people is punished by sanctions and debt, eventually the nation stops trying. And the world calls it corruption. Calls it laziness. Calls it underdevelopment. But it is not. It is trauma. It is exhaustion. It is the psychological result of a system designed to break you. And here is the most disturbing part. The people who benefit from this system, the people in wealthy nations, they do not see themselves as oppressors. They see themselves as helpers. They donate to charity. They sponsor children in Africa. They buy fair trade coffee and feel good about it. But these small acts of kindness do not dismantle the system. They reinforce it. Because charity allows us to feel like we are solving the problem without actually changing anything. It allows us to keep consuming, keep benefiting, keep living in comfort, while telling ourselves we are good people. But goodness without justice is not goodness. It is complicity. Now let us talk about the leaders. Because you have heard the stories. The dictators, the corruption, the stolen money, the violence. And yes, it is real. There are leaders in the developing world who have stolen billions from their own people. Who have lived in luxury while their citizens starved. And it is easy to look at them and think, see, this is why these countries do not develop. But let me ask you something. Where did those stolen billions go? They did not stay in those countries. They were moved to Swiss bank accounts. To real estate in London and New York. To shell companies in tax havens protected by Western laws. The corruption you see in the developing world is not isolated. It is enabled. It is protected. It is profitable. Because the same financial institutions that lend money to these countries also help their leaders hide it. The same governments that preach democracy and human rights also arm and support dictators when it serves their interests. Corruption is not a bug in the system. It is a feature. Because corrupt leaders are easy to control. They are easy to bribe. They are easy to overthrow when they stop cooperating. And when they fall, the people do not blame the system. They blame the leader. And the cycle continues. There was a president in Africa who tried to break this cycle. He refused loans from international institutions. He invested in local agriculture, local manufacturing, local education. He spoke openly about the exploitation of his continent. He called for African unity, for economic independence, for a new financial system that did not rely on the West. And he was killed. Shot down in broad daylight. And the official story was that it was an accident, a tragic mistake. But everyone knew. Everyone understood the message. This is what happens when you try to leave the game. This is what happens when you refuse to play by the rules. And after his death, his country collapsed into chaos. And the world watched and said, see, Africa cannot govern itself. But that was not failure. That was murder. And it was not the first time. And it will not be the last. You are starting to see it now, are you not? The pattern. The invisible hand that keeps certain countries locked in place. You are starting to realize that the world you were taught to believe in, the world of meritocracy, of opportunity, of progress, is not the world that actually exists. The world that exists is one where power protects power. Where wealth protects wealth. Where the few live in abundance because the many live in scarcity. And the most brilliant part of this system is that it convinces you it is natural. That it is inevitable. That it has always been this way and always will be. But it has not. This system is only a few hundred years old. It was built. Which means it can be unbuilt. But here is the question that should keep you awake at night. If this system is so obvious, if the exploitation is so clear, why does it continue? Why do people not rise up? Why do nations not unite and demand change? The answer is fear. And distraction. And division. Because the system does not just control resources. It controls information. It controls narratives. It controls what you see, what you believe, what you think is possible. It teaches you to look down, not up. To blame the poor, not the powerful. To see other struggling people as your competition, not your allies. It divides the world into us and them. Into deserving and undeserving. Into developed and underdeveloped. And it makes you believe that you are on the winning side because you were born in the right place. But you are not on the winning side. You are just on the comfortable side. For now. Because this system does not care about you either. It only cares about profit. And the moment you stop being profitable, you will be discarded too. Let me take you inside your own mind for a moment. Think about the last time you saw a news report about poverty in a developing country. What did you feel? Sadness? Pity? Maybe a little guilt? But then what? You moved on. You scrolled to the next post. You went back to your life. And that is exactly what the system wants. It wants you to feel just enough to think you are a good person, but not enough to actually do anything. It wants your empathy to be performative, not disruptive. It wants you to donate $10 and feel like you have done your part. But the problem is not a lack of charity. The problem is a structure. And structures are not changed by donations. They are changed by power. By organization. By people waking up and refusing to accept the way things are. And here is what they do not tell you. The people in the so-called underdeveloped world are not waiting for you to save them. They are fighting. Every single day. They are organizing. They are resisting. They are building alternative systems, alternative economies, alternative futures. But their voices are silenced. Their movements are criminalized. Their leaders are imprisoned or killed. And you never hear about it. Because the media you consume is owned by the same people who benefit from their oppression. So you only see the suffering. You only see the poverty. You only see the failure. And you never see the resistance. You never see the hope. You never see the possibility. And that is by design. Because if you saw it, you might join them. And that is the one thing the system cannot allow. There is a psychological principle called cognitive dissonance. It is the discomfort you feel when you hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time. For example, believing you are a good person while also benefiting from a system that harms others. And the human brain hates this discomfort. So it resolves it. Not by changing the behavior, but by changing the belief. You tell yourself that the system is fair. That people get what they deserve. That poverty is a result of poor choices, not poor circumstances. You tell yourself this because it is easier than facing the truth. Which is that your comfort is built on someone else's suffering. And that if you truly wanted to be good, you would have to give something up. And most people are not willing to do that. So they live in denial. And the system survives. But you are not most people. Because you are still here. You are still listening. You are still willing to sit with the discomfort. And that means something. It means you are capable of seeing beyond the illusion. It means you are capable of asking the questions that others are too afraid to ask. Questions like, what if the life I am living is not as innocent as I thought? What if the world I inherited is not the world I want to pass on? What if there is another way, and I just have not seen it yet? Let me tell you something that will sound radical but is actually obvious. The reason some countries never develop is because they are not allowed to. The reason some people remain poor is because their poverty makes others rich. The reason the world is divided into winners and losers is because the game was designed that way. And the only way to change it is to stop playing. To stop accepting the rules. To stop pretending that the system is broken when in fact it is working exactly as intended. The system is not failing. It is succeeding. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. Which is to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a few, while keeping the rest of humanity in a state of permanent struggle. And now you know. You cannot unhear this. You cannot unsee it. Every time you pick up your phone, you will think about the child in the mine. Every time you buy something cheap, you will wonder who paid the real price. Every time you hear about a failing nation, you will ask, who benefits from its failure? And that awareness is dangerous. Not to you. To the system. Because the system relies on ignorance. It relies on people not asking questions. It relies on you believing that the world is too complex, too broken, too far gone to change. But it is not. It is simpler than you think. There are people with power, and there are people without it. And the people with power will do anything to keep it. Unless the people without it decide they have had enough. So what do you do with this knowledge? You could ignore it. Go back to sleep. Pretend you never heard it. That is what most people do. Or you could let it change you. Let it shift the way you see the world. Let it make you uncomfortable enough to ask more questions, to learn more, to connect with others who see what you see. Because change does not start with a grand revolution. It starts with a crack in the illusion. With one person realizing they have been lied to. And then another. And another. Until the lie can no longer hold. This is not a call to action. This is not motivation. This is just the truth. The uncomfortable, undeniable truth. That the world you live in was built on theft. On violence. On exploitation. And it continues because we allow it to. Because we benefit from it. Because we have been taught to look away. But you are not looking away anymore. You are here. You are listening. And that means something is shifting. Inside you. Inside the world. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is where it begins. Some countries never develop because they were never meant to. Because their underdevelopment is the foundation of someone else's progress. Because the global economy is not a system of collaboration. It is a system of extraction. And you are part of it. Whether you like it or not. Whether you chose it or not. You are part of it. And the only question that matters now is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? You can close this video. You can forget what you heard. You can go back to scrolling, back to consuming, back to living as if none of this matters. Or you can sit with it. Let it disturb you. Let it haunt you. Let it be the thing that keeps you awake tonight. Because the world does not change when people feel good. It changes when people feel uncomfortable. When they realize that their silence is a choice. That their comfort has a cost. That their ignorance is not innocent. And maybe you are thinking, what can one person do? I am just one person. I did not create this system. I did not choose to be born into it. And you are right. You did not. But you are sustaining it. Every day. With every choice you make. With every product you buy. With every story you believe. With every time you look at poverty and think, that could never be me. Because it could. If you were born somewhere else. If the borders were drawn differently. If history had turned another way. You could be the one digging in the mine. You could be the one drinking dirty water. You could be the one watching your children go hungry while the world calls you lazy. And the only reason you are not is geography. And luck. And a system that decided your life matters more than theirs. But it does not. Your life does not matter more. It just costs more. And that is the cruelest truth of all. That in this world, value is not determined by humanity. It is determined by market forces. By supply and demand. By who controls the resources and who needs them. And the people who need them the most are always the ones who get the least. Not because they do not work hard. But because the system was built to keep them desperate. Because desperation is profitable. Because people who have no choice will accept any wage, any condition, any exploitation, just to survive. And that is how the system stays alive. By making sure that some people never have a choice. So here you are. At the end of this. And nothing has changed. The world is still the same. The system is still in place. The exploitation is still happening. But you are different now. You know. And knowledge is not power, but it is the beginning of power. It is the seed of something that could grow into resistance, into refusal, into a life lived differently. Not perfectly, not purely, but consciously, with awareness of the cost, with refusal to pretend, with willingness to be uncomfortable. And maybe that is all we can do. Maybe that is enough. To stop lying to ourselves. To stop accepting the world as it is and start imagining the world as it could be. To stop seeing poverty as inevitable and start seeing it as a choice. A choice made by people with power. A choice that can be unmade. And maybe one day, enough people will know. Enough people will see. Enough people will refuse. And the system will crack. Not because of a revolution. Not because of violence. But because the illusion finally breaks. Because people stop believing the lie. Because they realize that the emperors have no clothes. That the powerful are only powerful because we agree to be powerless. That the system only works because we keep playing along. And the moment we stop, everything changes. But that moment is not now. Not yet. Right now, the system is still winning. The exploitation is still happening. The children are still in the mines. The people are still hungry. The countries are still trapped. And you are still here. Still comfortable. Still safe. Still able to turn this off and go back to your life. And maybe you will. Maybe this will just be another video you watched. Another piece of content you consumed. Another moment of discomfort you moved past. Or maybe it will stay with you. Maybe it will follow you. Maybe it will be the thing that changes everything. Not today. But slowly. Quietly. Inevitably. Because once you see the cage, you cannot stop seeing it. And once you see it, you have to decide. Will you stay inside? Or will you start looking for the door?